Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Shelf Life. My name is Simran, and this is my podcast, Shelf Life. We talk about books, their philosophies, but most importantly, our personal relationship with a book. And today I have with me a very, very special guest. I have Sumedha, aka the Wordy Habitat. Now, if you didn't know her, she's got a wonderful, wonderful blog called The Wordy Habitat, and she also posts a lot on her Instagram about really cool book stuff and what's happening in her life. And there's a lot about movies as well. So you're in for a treat if you check her out. And I'm so glad to have you here, Sumedha. I hope you have a good time today.
I'm really glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I was just like, I was going through your blogs again, and I saw these really cool reviews about books, and I think you did one about romance as well, right? Um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
did.
so I was just going through it, and I know for a fact that our listeners would really, really enjoy your material and everything that you put out.
I'm glad you think so. I'm really
Yeah,
glad to be here.
and I think just tell us a little bit more about you, and maybe something that a lot of people don't know about you.
Okay, so I have been blogging for about 5 years. So my blog is basically my brainchild, and I started my Instagram and I tried YouTube as well. That complement my blog. But one thing that I think I don't always say out loud is that my blog is my brainchild, and it has grown with me over the years. So like I still post about books, I still post about blogging and everything, but you can so clearly see how I've grown through blogging. So at this point, it's like even if I want to quit, I can't because one's content is just so precious to them, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's my blog is my brainchild, and I don't think like I will ever stop it.
I absolutely love that. And that's such a great shift from, a lot of other reviewers and bloggers, especially. They have this thing about how they feel this sort of pressure to keep up with it. And that consistency is a huge issue a lot of times. And then there's you who's just, so committed to it. And you're really taking the time to grow with your blog. So I think that's absolutely wonderful that you're able to do that. Really.
Thank you. So the pressure is, I think, something we can't avoid, but it definitely takes time to like get past it and be like, okay, you know what, this is still my content, and it's still something that I really want to do out of passion. So it's once you get past that pressure, right? You go to a whole new level. I feel because I've actually I used to be completely in the book scene, but now I'm not as much in the book community because I do blog about other things. So that has helped remove the pressure about book blogging and reading so many books so that I can review all of it. So it's removed that pressure, and it has made it again into something that I really love and something that I'm putting out so everyone can benefit from it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I absolutely love that. I relate to everything you're saying right now because even with me, I've had this channel for I think a little over half a year, I think, and yeah, that pressure is still there a little bit. Every week churning out an episode and reading more, and I've been reading more than I ever have in my life. So it's really there. It is there, but I think if you just sort of learn to mix it up a little bit and still find that little bit of spark that you need, to keep going, it's so lovely. And I think, tell me a little bit more about how you got into it. So, why did you start blogging, and what really got you into it?
So okay. So what happened was in 12th grade, right? My final exams were nearing, and I just needed a distraction. Like I couldn't read as many books, and because I was just studying and there was just so much pressure, I just wanted some place to put out my thoughts about the books that I read and like maybe about my day. So I just opened a blog randomly out of nowhere one day. I just chose a random name, and I was like, you know what, let's post. And I was posting like almost every day, even if it was just like two paragraphs.
Hmm.
So I still hadn't known what blogging was. I didn't know what the book community was. But once I got into it, and it took after a few months, right? I was like, okay, this is a thing. This is a thing that I like. I can actually make something out of it. So about a year or two after that, I completely revamped my blog. I changed my name. And since then, my content has just been growing and I'm just falling in love with it all over again. So I think my motivation for blogging has changed wildly from the beginning, because in the beginning it was more like a diary. It was like just me putting my thoughts, but now I'm more like, how can I help people? Like, what do I know that I can say, tell people? Like, what did I think about this book so much that I can make them pick it up? The
Hmm.
motivation has changed, but blogging is still the same. So yeah.
Absolutely. I love the last part, especially about finding a way to actually just go beyond, just reviewing books, for example, and finding that way to connect with people and really kind of invest in building that community. And I think that's what, we've been doing with our podcast
Yeah.
as well. Trying to find a way to connect, really connect with people. And stories are the best medium to do that. Like people write books so that they can connect, right? I love that. And, I think now that we're trying to get to know you more, tell me a little bit about what was your journey with reading? Like, how did you get into reading? And um, what was the first story you ever heard? Or who really, was that influence in your life that really made you look at stories and, pick them up as something that is very dear to you?
It was my mom. Actually, the thing is, I don't have siblings, so I was an only child, and I just needed like some hobbies and something to do. And reading has been always something that my mom really loved. So
Hmm.
she, a private library opened nearby, and she was like, "Okay, let's go." And I picked out two books, and I just have never stopped. Like it was back in one sixth grade, and I still feel that same passion for reading, because there's so many things to read in books, right? And you just continue to keep learning. I'm pretty sure if I go back to the books that I read that time, I would learn so much more, because at that point I would just think about, okay, this is happening. Now that I know how to read critically, so it'll be
Hmm.
completely different, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just really wonderful that books can still continue to stay new and interesting. And it's been
Mm.
years, like, and my mom has been the biggest person to like get me into reading.
Wow, that's so lovely. I think even for me, it was my mom who really got me into reading, and she actually read a lot. And I think just you have this thing when you're a kid that you want to imitate your parents, right? So I would
Yeah.
try to pick up the books that she was reading, and I would obviously not be able to read those because I was too young. But that it was the same thing, you sort of look for influences and you get them, and you really pick up these new hobbies. And
Yeah.
so tell me, how was that like? Like, what did you experience with that surge of reading and everything that you did? How did that impact your growing up years,
Yeah.
and the way that you molded yourself as a person?
I think that really affected me. In the beginning, at least, like, I didn't know what genres were. I didn't know what different books were, and I just go to shelves and like, okay, apparently this is a kids section. I need to pick up books over here, and I would just pick up books like once every 2 days. I would just go pick up two books and I'd go, and I didn't have like any distinction. Like I like this, I like that. So that's the one thing I feel like really contributed to my growth, right? Because I didn't have I was not picky about what I was reading.
Hmm.
So I, even after like once I finished the kids section, right, I was like going into my teenage years. So I was going to the young adult section, and I was just like picking up random books, picking up vampire stories, picking up like mysteries, and I was picking up regular fiction. And it's like a ton of knowledge coming from here and there. And I do feel like I learned a lot more than I would have if I hadn't read those books, because even now my peers are like, why do you know this? Like, how do you know this? I mean, I just read so many books, like when you read so many books, you know things. So yeah, I feel like it's made me into this knowledgeable person that my friends feel like, she knows so much, and here I'm just like, I just read books where people do things.
Oh, I love that. I
So
absolutely
yeah.
agree. I think I didn't have like a genre either. I would just pick up anything and start reading. I've read so many atlases, I can't even keep count. And I just,
Atlases.
yeah, I've just picked up anything. I started with anything and I would just like go on with it. And then it was basically trying to just, like read as much as you can. So read anything, but
Yeah.
then just read. And yeah, I agree. I mean, a lot of new readers, especially, they have this whole thing about, finding the book and finding the right match for you.
Yeah.
They treat it like it's like some matrimonial setup, but it's not. You just have to go with it. I agree. I totally agree. And so tell me a little bit about, What were those first books that you read, that you picked up?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the books that really impacted you, maybe.
I think the first book, like honestly, when I look back, right? So The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón, I just picked it up randomly in the shelf and I was like, this looks good. Apparently, it's about a place of books. It's about a hidden library, and let's read it. But the thing is, for a seventh grader, right? That book was frankly too much because it actually delves into a lot of character studies. It delves into tragedy, love, betrayal, and all of those things. And I was just like, it's a library, let's read it. So, but once I reread about a couple years later, right? When I reread it, I actually learned more. And I was like, oh my God, I did not know this. Like, now I'm understanding what they mean. Now I'm understanding why they acted like this, once I reach my teenagers. Because in the book as well, the character grows from age 10. So we follow him from age 10 to like age, 20 or 30 or something. So as I grew, I could relate to every part of his life and be like, okay, now I understand why he was doing this. And when he came to his adulthood and he was the main character found himself really connecting with an author that he was chasing for years. And the decisions that he made, only when I reached like my 15s or my 16s, I understood like, okay, why is he doing this? I did not know before, but then I was like, okay, now I get it. Now that I'm an adult, I get it. So I feel like that book grew up with me. So even though it didn't specifically impact me as a person, it just showed me like how much I've grown, and it showed me like, okay, I need to grow more to understand what else they're saying. So that is one book that would definitely be like in the library of my life. And
Oh, wow.
so that one, and then
That's so
what
well
else?
put.
I think
Yeah.
I'm not sure because I think I have read so many books, but after that I just went off to vampire stories. But only when like I came back to books in like romance books and adult books recently, they've been like really impactful. Like Alisha Rai's The Right Swipe that I read about last year, I think, and that just shows a really powerful woman, right? Who's like, yes, I want to do this. This is my dream. I'm gonna go after it. And she has insecurities, but we see how she has flaws, but she still like works to get through them, and she's just like a really powerful person, right? I was like, I want to be this person. I want to be as passionate about my work and my friends and my life as she is. So yeah, Alisha Rai's books really they're really nice. Like,
Yeah,
The
that's
Right Wife is just one of the best books I've read last year.
oh wow, that's super cool, and you read it recently. That's pretty cool too. And I agree with the first part
Yeah.
of what you said. Yeah, that you picked up something that you really didn't understand too much at that age, but then you revisited it many years later, and then you sort of understood the gist of it and what it was trying to say. Um,
Yeah.
and I think, yeah, that a similar thing happened to me as well. When I picked up, I picked up Gone with the Wind when I was like, I think 11 maybe, and that's really not the age you read Gone with the Wind.
Okay.
I mean, it's a really
Yeah.
vast, like heavy book, and I didn't understand any of it. I left it halfway, I think, and
Yeah, it is.
yeah, and then I revisited it many years later, and then I sort of really understood what the book was trying to say. So I agree with that, and that's a
Yeah.
really good segue into what the genre that we're going to be talking about today, which is romance. And you said that it's one of your favorite genres. So would you like to explain, like, why do you think
Yeah.
romance is a genre for you? Why do you gravitate towards romance?
So the thing is, romance is a very vast genre, right? And it's actually one of the biggest genres, and it brings in actually a ton of money to the publishing industry. And yet, it is quite put down when you like among the rest of the books, right? Fiction, literary fiction, even fantasy is heralded more than romance. But when you
Yeah.
see in the end, romance books still generate a lot of income. And I picked up romance books on a whim because again, I was just picking up random books on the in the library, but I didn't completely get into them until recently because romance books do generally portray characters in their 20s and in their 30s. So until I reach now, and now that I'm an adult, I'm like, okay, I understand why they like this. I understand why past affects them so much. And
Hmm.
the reason it is my favorite genre is because it has a happy ending. So one that just makes me really happy, and I love like ending a book on a satisfied note. But on the other hand, it follows a pattern, right? Like two characters meet each other, get to know each other, fall in love. Like something happens, they break up, and then they get back again. So that pattern exists in every single romance book. But taking that exact same pattern, authors have to do it over and over again with new concepts, with different characters, with different plot lines, like still keeping the same pattern. You have to give us a happy ending at the end. You have to give us a conflict. You have to give two characters that we would really love. So what else are you going to add to make it unique? And just seeing, and honestly, I feel like romance authors are one of the geniuses in writers, because how can they just take the same thing and do it over and over again and still make it new? And it's again a vast genre, because along with the love story you can include anything, because the only pattern is that it should be a love story. Other than that, it can include drama, it can include murder, it can include thriller, it can include mental illnesses, it can include diversity, like whatever you pick up it can include, as long as it has a love story. So I've actually learned so much more from romance novels in the past few years than I have from literary fiction, because literary fiction still is boxed. Like it shows that it has to teach you about something and has to show something that you can criticize, but romance books can just teach without that being the intention and the plot of the book.
Absolutely.
So I just really like that.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, I had one of my points here is that romance novels are not really perceived to be the stuff of literary circles, and they're not really considered as geniuses of literature, right? They don't really win accolades for the writing or for the plot. It's never really that. They get consumed by the masses, but they don't get that sort of appreciation. And I was actually going to ask you, a lot of people say that they don't even deserve that sort of appreciation because the writing is substandard and all of that stuff. But I guess you don't think that, right? You do believe that they that they do deserve that sort of appreciation, correct?
They do. Like, I feel like once you get into romance, only when you read a few romance books and actually keep your mind open, do you understand what they're made of. And until then, your mind is just closed off. So it's like, it's a case of narrow-mindedness and being open, right? So if you keep saying that something is bad, it's not going to be good. Like if you should try it once, you should try it twice, and then be like, okay, be open to it, and then you'll understand. So yes, the appreciation is low, but that is how it is. And, we are working to change it. So bloggers and romance writers and romance reviewers are like, what, this is awesome. Like you should read more of this. So that's what we're doing. And we're going to change it one book at a time.
Yeah, you guys are really pushing for it. I see it. And it's true. I don't think I've read any book that didn't have a love story. Honestly, even the thrillers, even the horrors, everything has a love story at the core of it. So you can't really escape the genre.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, talk to me a little about what were the first few romance novels that you read that really pulled you into the genre and, made you want to read more. So talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so the first book I read was it was this book called The Blessing, something that my mom picked up, and she didn't know it was romance, so she just got it for me. I don't even remember the author exactly. It was just like a woman holding a baby on the cover, but that really it showed depth, it showed character, and it was my first romance book, and I was like, I'm going to read more of this. Like, this is something that I really like. And one of the later, I actually really fell in love with romance books that deal with tragic pasts and, character studies and like mental illnesses, depression, healing, and, falling in love and healing by yourself and healing with the other person. So like there was this one book called Fighting Redemption that I read it, I think about 25 times, because I just could not get enough of, how the characters, like the entire book is sad. Okay, the writing is sad. It's not even happy. So, but it's a love story. So like it is just so different from what I expected. And and half the book they spend separately, like they're not even together. Half the book is just them healing and waiting for the other person and loving, and it's just like it was so different. So that was one book that I really, really liked. And another book was, I think, Falling Into You. And that was another same thing. So, like, all these books that dealt with tragic pasts and all of those things, I really got into that because I was like, wow, there's so much depth in people. Like, the way they're adding
Yeah.
depth into these characters in the book, because obviously romance books are completely based on the characters, right? They're not based on the plot as much as the characters. You need to love the characters. So the fact that romance books can be complete character studies really took me aback. So yeah, those books were like my initial really big favorite ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. The plot is really not the driving force of any of these romance novels, I would say. Oh, I think my light. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think it's more of, in fact, I was very recently I was reading this book. I don't remember who it's by. It's called Eleanor and Park. I think Rainbow Pritchell or something. I'm not sure about the
Yeah.
name. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even that, I
It's
mean,
Rainbow Rowell, yes.
Rainbow Rowell, yes. And there's no plot as such, but it's just you kind of hear these two characters' narratives, and that's really all there is to the story. And it's still so good. It still hits hard, and yeah, you can't help but love these books. I totally agree, and I think starting off from there, the initial few books that I read that were really, true blue
Yeah.
romance novels, I think were Nicholas Sparks books. So I read The Notebook and See Me and a lot of his other, the real classic like love stories. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
when you read those books, you really, all you want to do is fall in love. That's all you want to do. And
You do.
yeah,
Yes.
you're 12, 13 years old, and that's all you want. And it's so like, it's
Yeah.
perfect. It's really perfect in a way. And then I think if I go even
Yeah.
further back, I think my first real engagement with like a love story would have to be the Twilight series. uh, I think I saw those
Oh,
movies.
yes. I mean, all of us did.
Yeah,
Like,
we
Twilight
we
was
all
one of the most biggest ones, right? Like, at that time.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, I don't think there's anyone who's missed Twilight. And I remember like
Yeah.
we weren't allowed to, read those books in school, so they would like be taken away if we read those. So you had to like sneak it in your bag and
Yeah.
sneak it in everywhere and read it. And I think, yeah, I think that's also like a sort of that's an element that really draws people into romance. I feel the fact that it's kind of not really appreciated by the society, but then there's this, you kind of have to fight for it a little bit to read those books, and that sort of really interests you as well. So tell me, like uh,
Yeah.
when you were reading these romance novels,
Yeah.
um, especially like these Twilights and your Nicholas Sparks and all of these other classic like love stories, um, did you feel that, you know, this genre especially was very heteronormative and it didn't really include a lot of LGBT love stories and a lot of these other complex love stories that were not the norm? Did you feel that as well?
I did. I did. Like, it was very apparent in the beginning, especially, when you're first getting into the genre, you're like, I want to read these books, especially if you're reading from the library. They're not going to have diverse books, right? They're not going to have books that are like not hetero. And I didn't think of it much in the beginning because, I was not exposed. So I was just like, what they exist, but apparently these are the norms, these are the books that exist. But when I started like looking online, when I started looking at Goodreads, and the thing was, I completely noticed, like, especially when you see romance book lists, right? The most popular books are like Jamie Oliver, and sorry, not Jamie Oliver, Jamie something else. And
Mm.
so, like, those books are just so high and just so much rated that at this point, it's really hard for diverse books to come up at all because they've had a 10-year head start. But once I did read, and especially like when I was in my college romance phase, I was like, okay, I get it, but like, or kuch hai, like, and I was just going through like these underrated romance books, and that's when I found like books with LGBTQ romances, like especially aromantic, asexual, like let's talk about love. And that was one book that I read, the first book that I read with an asexual main character. I was like, wow, I did not know romance books with asexual characters exist. I was like, wow, like first time. And then after that, I read like more diverse books, and I started looking at lists. So, but yeah, in the beginning, it was completely, straight only, but we need to change that. But yeah, it was.
LGBT literature till like years later in my life, and that was like very surprising to me as well, because I do feel like they are written a little bit differently. I think there is a certain set of sensibilities that find themselves in LGBT stories that don't find themselves in hetero books. So
Definitely, yes.
yeah, there was definitely a difference, but it's a good difference. You do learn more when you're reading these different books.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I think the first LGBT book that I read probably was Holding the Man by Timothy Conograve. It's like a memoir. And then, I went on to read more. But then again, I think that was the first time that I realized that, romance is more than just, boy meets girl and they fall in love
Yeah.
and all of that. So, what more? Have you been in your journey with reading romance novels? Have you been experimenting with that genre a little bit? Like, have you been reading a little bit more of some sort of diverse love stories? Has that happened with you?
I think at this point it's more diverse reads than normal reads anyway, because
Mm.
I'm heavily into the book community, and I've surrounded myself with people who like constantly push diverse books. So at this point, like if I go back to those straight white books, it's only because like I'm going at some random Goodreads list. But otherwise, like yeah, I mean, Sarah Desai, like her recent book, I think The Dating Plan just came out,
Hmm.
and The Marriage Game, it was really nice, and Alisha Rai's books, and Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors, that was also really nice. So, like,
Yeah.
obviously now we are finding more books, and we are
Hmm.
finding like more diverse and ones that, and obviously, like once you get into diverse books, right, it's hard to go back because you
Yeah.
see so much that they have that those books earlier did not, and you're like, okay, that was so bland, why did I read it? Like there is not as much depth in the writing, because the same thing has been done over and over again, right?
Yeah.
Previously also, like especially with college romances, not much is done, so at some point you just get bored. But nowadays, like such good books are coming out, and you're like, wow.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. And I don't know if you write like fiction. Do you write fiction?
No, I
No.
don't. I'm just a reader.
Yeah. But just like think about it a little bit. Like if you were a writer of fiction, how do you not go into that whole trope? Like how do you not follow the cliched um, tropes that writers of romance usually use? Like how do you make your love story different? I really don't know. Like I don't know what is the best way to go about it. Do you think there's some way to navigate those waters?
So something new. Okay, so the thing is, when people pick romance books, right, they do expect something. So I think the first thing would be to set down what they do expect. So they do expect two characters to have really good chemistry. They do expect them to have like a growing curve. Like some time where they get to know each other. Even if they're best friends, we want them to have like a growth. And then obviously at the end is going to be a happy ending. But one thing that especially recently that we've been trying to say, like, you know what, we don't need this, is the third act breakup. Because
Hmm.
as we know, romance books have like three acts. They get together, fall in love, break up, get together again. So we're like, the third act breakup, we just don't want it anymore. We're like, no, don't give us, just give us happy stuff. Like we
Yeah.
don't care, we don't want to see, so that's one thing that we've been leaving. And another, I think, other than that, the unique part that you can bring is just anything else, like your characters, the setting, what people say, the conflicts, especially. Like usually the communication, what do you say, gap conflict has been completely overwritten, we have saturated that trope. We do not need that anymore. So like something new, some tropes that we do have in real life that we don't see in books as often. Like I think we do have to take more inspiration from what we're living and, just write that.
That is so interesting, and I think um, it's really striking. I feel like I really am starting to think that romance novels are extremely revolutionary in that sense. They really kind of
It
have
is. They
the
should be revolutionary.
yeah, they really have the ability to change the culture of the time, right? They determine how people date. They determine what is attractive, what is not attractive in people. Like,
Yes.
exactly. Like if I have to take the example of Twilight, I mean that's what made these bad boys look very attractive, and that whole, that broad.
Yeah.
I think that's what started it just like started that off, and now everybody's following that, like the bad boys or the attractive ones or whatever. So
Yeah, yeah.
it's so revolutionary in that sense, and people don't look at it that way. It's so sad.
Yeah, they don't. And the thing is, there are so many romance novels that are actively trying to change things. We're bringing in soft boys, we're bringing in fat girls, we're bringing in, flawed characters who have issues to deal with that, with Get a Life, Chloe Brown, right? She has chronic illness, and so and obviously. Actor Age Abraham has like two characters with autism as the main characters, but it is not the main thing. Like that is just a trait that they have, but the characters themselves, they're so like good. So we're bringing in new people, we're bringing in realistic people. Like we're not bringing in perfect people who are like just, my life is sad because this happened to me one day 10 years back. So that is not the norm anymore. So like we're bringing in more depths, and I really do think that it is changing what we expect in people and what we expect to see in real life. Once I read these books, I'm like, yes, I want this. I will not accept anything less than this.
Absolutely. And, like getting more personal, tell me about how reading these love stories and reading these novels, how did that actually shape your opinion of love? I mean, has it been good? Has that influence been good or bad? Talk to me about like your relationship with these love stories.
I think in the beginning, it was just not something that I considered, especially like as we grow, we obviously see it all around, and we're like, what, it exists. It's fine. Who knows if it's going to be good or bad? But romance books, like they set a standard and they give you hope, because obviously it's a happy ending. And yes, it's supposed to be a happy ending. That's why, you're like, okay, this might exist. But still, they set a standard. They're like, you should not accept less than this, and this is how you should be. Like if someone else needs the support, this is how you should be. So it's teaching and setting the standard at the same time, and I feel like I've learned a lot more from these books than I have from seeing people around me.
Absolutely, I agree. And even this whole thing of like, I think romance novels also clash a lot with society as a whole, right? I mean, if you didn't
Yeah, they
read,
do.
if you didn't read these novels, you would think that I don't know, that having sex outside of marriage is like a bad thing,
Yeah.
or maybe like that LGBT love is a sin, or what I mean. Like you would sort of still kind of believe that, but then because books are a medium to change things in the society,
Yeah.
you also sort of grow up, like you said, you grow
Yeah.
with those books. Like for instance, I think I read Lady Chatterley's Lover, and one more book. I think it was Madame Bovary by Gustave Flaubert. And these are like really old books. And when they were released, they were banned by the governments at the time because, they were supposed to be,
Oh,
yeah, they were supposed to be like really
okay.
scandalous. And how can you show like a married woman having an affair? Like, all of that stuff. But you read those books and you realize that there's so many different forms of love. There's so many different stages to love. And um,
Yeah.
it can take so many different shapes, and that's really wonderful how romance novels can change society as a whole. It's revolutionary.
Yeah. And it's quite subtle too, isn't it? Because it's
Hmm.
just books. It's not like it's propaganda, like a book can go out and it might not make any waves at all. But even if this one person reads it and that one person forwards it, or that one person advocates something new, it completely changes this thing. And it's just so subtle. Like at the end, you might not even know which book caused this. You don't know who caused this. The author also might not know themselves, like, this was my book that, set off this ripple. But
Yeah.
it's so subtle. And the thing is, slowly as more books come forward like this, right, that
Hmm.
more books show modernized concepts, and that show, like, this is okay, this is okay. As more books come forward and more people read it, there'll be like a slow change in the entire society's mindset. And I feel like we don't give enough credit to books who do that.
Exactly. And especially romance novels, we definitely don't give enough credit to.
Yeah.
And it's really high time. And I think, that would be like a beautiful way to kind of wrap up our conversation today as well, because we really have covered quite a lot of ground and we've learned so much through this conversation. And I think, as someone who reads romance novels and as someone who just loves books in general, what would you like to tell everyone who's watching and who's probably not picked up romance or who's not picked up books at all? What is that one thing that you would want to tell them, and how do you want to get them
Mm.
to our side?
I think just keep an open mindset, like don't write off something without trying it 3 to 4 times. So, like, once is not enough, especially like you're not, even if you try art, right? You're not going to get it right at the first try. You are going to suck in the beginning. So, anything requires like a first few times of a trial, and, try a few times and then be like, okay, if you don't like it, and then you can say it. But try and keep an open mind and like read books and see, like, okay, what is so great that people talk about it. And there are tons of genres to pick from, right? And even in romance, there is historical, there is modern, there is fantasy, and there are so many things that you can pick up that you will find something that you like. And
Hmm.
you should just try to find out.
That's perfect. Even I tell people like same thing, that you have to stick with it for a bit. It might seem boring, it might seem really tedious, and why does it take so long? I can just watch a movie. But
Yeah.
try to stick with it. Go beyond the first chapter. See if there's something that really interests you, and then like get on with it. It's okay. It's fine.
Yeah.
Like you said, I mean, who knows? Maybe you could be reading a masterpiece that's going to be, the best book of the 21st century or something of that sort. Who knows?
Yeah.
It could very well happen. And that's really wonderful. And I loved having this conversation with you, Sumedha. I really learned a
Me
lot.
too.
And I've had a great time.
Thank you for having me and like having this conversation, because it has been like really good to actually talk about, romance books and like how it affects the society and like how it affects people. So it's like it's a really fun conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think everyone who's watching would probably also agree. You and the way that you are, and it just sort of reflects in your blogs, in the way that you write, and in everything that you do. I think that personality sort of just shines, and it's shown through the episode as well.
Thank you.
So it was really fun to talk to you. And to everyone listening, I'm sure they can find you on a lot of these links. I'll link them in the description, your Instagram and your blog as well, so they could definitely find you there. And yeah, I had a lot of fun. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.